Boom. There you go.
Yeah,
Swathi,
we're live.
how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for having me on this show, Asif and Lucky.
Well, it's an exciting Wednesday. So, when it's Wednesday, it's me and Lucky and our guest getting together. And today's guest of AyAyAyAI is a subject matter expert in machine learning, unlike anybody I know. And that gives me such an excitement to say, we talk about machine learning so much. How do you build a machine learning, So we got to have Swathi in here come and talk about how to get into the nitty gritty of machine learning. But first of all, we're going to talk about, going to the groceries, getting the ingredients so you can come home and cook the machine learning anything you want, right? But you got to have the ingredients. So Lucky, how do you feel?
Man, I'll tell you. I'm feeling a little hoarse today. Today I've been talking a lot, as far as, work and engineering, but I am so glad to have Swathi on the call today. And, we're going to jump into some areas that, some questions about what different cloud offerings are and what AI or machine learning is in the cloud. So I'm really excited to learn today more. But yeah, today, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. AyAyAyAI.
Yes.
Thank you a lot. And this is like bringing so much energy, which is what I needed after a day full of back-to-back meetings. So thank you again for having me. So Asif, I know you started off in a very good question, like what are the ingredients that go into machine learning? And what I want to emphasize here is that I don't want to do machine learning just for the sake of it. When I speak to executives, when I speak to leaders in a business organization, I use machine learning as another tool in the toolkit or the toolbox to solve a business problem. Because I consider technology as an enabler of all problems in the world, right? They just solve problems. So what I would like to start with is what problem are you trying to solve and for whom? And most often when you speak to a business leader, they might be a senior director, they might be a vice president, they might be a CMO. What are the goals of the organization? So they do have the long-term goals, the have the short-term goals. But in a nutshell, any organization has the vision or mission or long-term goals, right? So in a nutshell, if you go to Amtrak, for example, one line, carry American passengers from one destination to another with safety, right? That's in a nutshell. And most organizations have some form of that in one line you can state that. If you can find a use case that maps directly to that, to the mission of the organization, that's the best place to be. And you can actually, you'll be shocked and surprised how easily you can do. So going back to the example of Amtrak, right? There are two things that can happen if the train doesn't run or it is delayed because of a snowstorm, because of political rallies, because of whatever reasons. One, you can't get the passenger from A to B and you can't transport them safely. So working backwards, we identified the use case with Amtrak to forecast train delays. So that is predictive analytics is a type of machine learning modeling that you use for forecast. So one is aligned with the organization goal, whatever is your use case, hypothesis. And I like to use the term hypothesis because until you can discover the data and see what can be actually achieved, it is a hypothesis. It's a hypothesize, you're hypothesizing this use case. And number two is you want to make sure what type of data exists, right? So number one, okay, the executives have said, okay, we are interested in this predictive analytics. So number two is I call this the hunting mode, and you'll be shocked in all the machine learning projects I've led in the last 5 years across sectors, healthcare, lung cancer research, transportation, etc. The maximum time we take is to hunt for the right data. Because you find you start with the wrong data, you'll get wrong output, skewed results, right? So second is you hunt for the data. And the third one is what type of infrastructure you asked, I think, before we started off the podcast, what type of infrastructure. At the onset, I would say just having a laptop with enough sufficient memory and processing power, you can do it. But the power of any machine learning algorithms is in vast quantities of data. So any cloud provider today at the tip of your fingers, you can pay and get some compute and storage. So those are the three things I would start with and go from there.
Well, the analogies, right? It's perfect because when you're talking about actual business case, people can visualize it, tell the story in the head. Well, guess what you're going to do with the data? You're going to tell a story with your data. And that data, if the story matches with machine learning use cases, then you'll go after it, right? If I may going back to the groceries and coming back to the kitchen and cooking something, well, if you're going to boil water, you already have a pan, you already have a water. You don't need to go to the grocery store. But guess what? If you're going to build anything complex more than boiling water, you're going to have to go to the grocery stores. And you're going to have to know what sort of things you want to bring back home and cook it in the kitchen. And by the time you cook it in the kitchen, you also have to think about wait, hold on a second. When I went to the grocery store, I was by myself. When I cooked the stuff, I was by myself. Now that I'm ready to eat, there's about 18 other people in the house and I have to feed them all. So you didn't cook for enough people. So the scalability of all these, you have to have a long vision and then reverse engineer into what it is that you are doing today and what it is that you're capable of right now, right? If you're capable of going to the grocery store, but not being able to afford anything, well, change of plan. You cannot go to the grocery store. You might have to go to the backyard and just get some vegetables, right? And feed that to the 18 people. I'm going to say a long story here, but I think it makes sense because when we talk about machine learning, one of the most powerful analogies you can have is that you have applied machine learning use cases, right? If you understand the use cases, you come to a different conclusion. But if you know how to build a machine learning capability from the scratch, you have a different sort of capability, right? It's sort of like knowing how to build a microwave, which, by the way, is not my analogy. It's the Cassie from Google. Mm-hmm. She uses the analogy of if you know how to build a microwave, you're a different kind of person. But if you just use the microwave, just learn how to cook inside of a microwave. That's what you're doing. You're doing applied machine learning versus building a machine learning, right? Mm-hmm. So that applied machine learning, lots of principle goes behind it, right? Lots of understanding of project management, understanding the people, the capabilities, right? And far and most of all, it's your data, right? Just because you have data doesn't mean you will be able to monetize, get return on data or return on investment from those data, right? Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think Lucky is just so excited here with the list of questions he has. Maybe he will fire one off.
No. I mean, what you guys are covering are definitely spot on. I'm just interested more in the different types of projects that she's been exposed to with. At the end, I see it now more because AI has become more popular, the buzzword, and more in the generative side and more in the commercial side. But the stuff that really works, the stuff that has been proof positive, AI or machine learning, where people develop something, it's hard to actually put out a project. And you've given stats before, I think 97% fail or some ridiculous number.
Yeah, 87%. 83% of the machine learning use cases will fail in development.
Yeah, in development phase, so
and they'll never deploy.
Yeah, so you made a point, you really have to know your data at the end. You really have to spend time knowing what you're trying to put together. And so, yeah, I'm excited. There's parts of this that's curious to what's in the cloud and what she sees in development now, because development in the cloud is a lot easier now than it was in the past. So I'm interested to see how she's grown with cloud and how that's developed from Azure and AWS, because I have some exposure to one or the other, but it'd be nice to know what more about that. But no, you guys definitely hitting it spot on.
Yeah, good points there. And I will go back to your analogy there, Asif, for a second. You spoke about the cooking analogy and ingredients, and I love cooking. I cook every day. I made my dinner today at 4:00 so that I can be on the podcast. And I think my family is just enjoying what I made. So cooking, I love cooking, stress buster and so on. So that's a great analogy. So I'll extend that. So you're cooking for a family, is different from when you're cooking for a party that you're throwing for 18 people, is very different from when you're cooking for a restaurant, right? So that is my analogy to a startup, to a large scale corporation or an enterprise. So I would say the family of 4 or 6 people is like a startup, and then you're cooking for a restaurant where you have to be planned. You can't just say today I'm going to make this dish and run to the grocery store. So similarly, applied machine learning use cases and the infrastructure needs will vary if you're dealing with a startup or you're dealing with a large scale enterprise. So again, I think there was an AyAyAI framework. That was the first framework I had developed, the AI implementation framework, AI playbook, we called it, way back 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago now. Basically, you do the layout of the land and you do a bottoms up or top down approach. So, for example, if you're a large scale enterprise, what do I mean by bottoms up? So one business unit, obviously the enterprise can have a lot of business units. One business unit, say marketing, gets very enthusiastic to use artificial intelligence. So they can be their own little bubble, and because the CMO initiated, they can have some use cases and start developing. So that is a bottoms up. Each business unit might have something independently running. So essentially, they're not capitalizing on economies of scale. What do I mean by that? They have data they're utilizing in their marketing shop, which is different from their finance department. So they're not come together and said, hey, we're all working on different machine learning use cases. How about we think of a combined infrastructure to house all this data so we get a good deal, whether it's AWS or Azure, right? So that's the bottoms up approach. And the top down is you start establishing your data team, your data management team, data governance team, and also you have the scalable infrastructure. I think most clients I've worked with, a large scale enterprises or even government organizations where I was involved in proposal writing, actually are in the latter, where they think about the large scale infrastructure, whether they're using AWS or data lake or even Snowflake for their data lakes and so on. So that's number one, the infrastructure that you have to think about. Number two is whether it's a top down or bottoms up. And sometimes it can be both, right? There is a business unit who have already started it, but the centralized IT department can think of combining forces on the infrastructure. And the third one is startup is a different animal. So currently I'm the chief technology officer of a nonprofit startup called Sustain Chain, which is in the climate tech space, basically. And we have implemented the machine learning algorithm just last year, the reinforcement learning engine. And for startup, a couple of ways to go about it is that you can use something like a reinforcement based learning engine, or it's a type of machine learning where you don't have to start with vast quantities of data. You can start with whatever data you have and build on top of that. You can do that. Or number two, you can get outside data and enrich the data. There are a lot of sources. The important thing to remember when you get outside data is to find out where that data is coming from, because data provenance is very, very important, because we don't want data created by robots sitting in China or somewhere else. We want to make sure that it's authentic data. So for example, when we did the lung cancer research for Roseville Park University Hospital, one of the projects I was leading in the healthcare lung cancer research space, we found the data on good governmental websites, hospital readmissions database. And that's where we had to pay to procure the data. There was authenticity around the data. They actually document how they collected the data, from where they collected the data. All the hospitals are listed. So you want to make sure when you're procuring data from outside sources, you know how the data was collected, what is the authenticity of the data, which makes a big difference. So there's a couple of ways startups can think about. And if you're a startup, I wouldn't invest in advanced tools or infrastructure like data lakes and so on. You just start with compute and storage, and then when you hit your 10 million or 1 million users, you're ready to invest in further infrastructure.
Um, yeah, I think Lucky will agree here that one of the things that we take, lots of initiatives towards is uh, helping small business, right? Because I believe there's about 70 million companies that are listed in the United States, or is it worldwide? I think it is in the US alone, 70 million. So not all of them, as you can tell, is big business, right? There's businesses that are listed with the U.S. government or state or whatever. Um, they will all have some rise, and some will just stay stale, right? And ones that are shooting up very fast from the bottom to the top has some AI stories to tell, right? If not all of them, I think some of them do. And if I may say, Netflix, right? Some AI went behind Netflix, and Netflix went from what 2008 to 2022 within a short frame of time to be one of the top FANG, right? Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, right? Google, right? So they went pretty top, but they have this AI story to tell. Google has an AI story to tell. It's about 22-year-old company, or a little over 22-year right now. So even young, but they all have some AI story to tell, because Google's success, a lot of people might not talk about it, but Google search is machine learning 101, right? How to prioritize. And you could look at Facebook success, but even other small startups, if we start looking into it, what we will find is lots of the startups doesn't necessarily have to have AI machine learning as their core service or part of their core use cases, right? As in, that's not how they should go around and find investment, right? It doesn't have to be that. It's that if you provide a service and you want to enhance your users' experience, you want to invest into AI machine learning. Not that you're going to go out and buy it today, but you want to build that over time. As you provide that service, find a way you are increasing the user satisfaction and user experience using your AI machine learning tools and capabilities, right? User doesn't necessarily have to know, how Netflix uses AI machine learning, but people are very satisfied using Netflix versus Disney app, if I may say so. I mean, I use HBO, don't get me wrong, love HBO content, but I'd rather watch Netflix if I want the user experience of just clicking through things and getting there faster, and also always find the content that I want to see. Because one example of AI machine learning that they use using AWS SageMaker, right, is that me as a user, what I see on a thumbnail and on that content that I'm about to watch is actually specific to me, right? Yeah. So if you're a certain kind of user and they have a certain user profile on you, they will create that thumbnail based on your preferences and your previous experience, previous watch history, right? Trying to get the right word here. So I think for the startups, all the startups that we will have, we will need more of, because there's this prediction in what the future of industries look like, right? It'll be that there'll be multiple giant companies, and these giant companies will only be able to sustain themselves by having tons of LLCs providing it the services, and that giant company will provide the service to the rest of the world, right? So small businesses' ability to develop an AI vision today is not only useful, but I think it is a reality, because right now you see it automatically, right? If you're a company that uses software and you're very software reliant, you necessarily don't take a small business services unless that small business can speak to the software somehow, right? Because they don't have that manual human to human conversations. There's more like software to software conversation. Now imagine in the future, if you don't have that AI capability, your AI cannot talk to the other AI, right? You will have those similar problems, as in you might not be able to do the business in a fashion that otherwise you could do, right? As in the future, you'll have tons of small businesses talking to this one, let's say Google as a company. And if your AI is not able to communicate, you're going to lose out on many of the businesses that Google will provide you, right? And Google is providing with AI machine learning services. So as a startup, I always encourage, not that you have to stray away from your focus of what it is that you're doing as a startup. If you're not an AI startup, but you are a startup, you should sort of put some time away and start strategizing about your data acquisition, your data sensors, your data points, your ability to collect those data and keep those data safe and not just go all over the place in a riot. I know it's a hard task, but I think it's just that important for the small startup to be a growing startup and growing business to a mid-level. It's very important to have some sort of AI machine learning conversation today.
Yeah, I would say the only caveat to that is it depends on business. You use the word small business and startups interchangeably. I think there is a difference.
That's
According to me, the small business can be, I'm providing plumbing services in Northern Virginia. And a startup could be, I am providing payroll software for all plumbing services in the United States. Right. So that's number one. And I'm not saying that the small business, plumbing business cannot find the use cases of AI, but they might or might not have digital in place already.
Right. That's right. Yeah, not all business are business.
Yeah, startups in the tech space, definitely. And I want to go back to your example of big tech, right? The examples you said, not only have they used it for actual customer satisfaction, but actually to increase their revenue. So one of the interesting things about Google compared to any other organization, even in the last, even Facebook is now overtaken by TikTok in terms of the growth trajectory, growth trajectory of users. But Google, nobody has touched the Google search engine because of the proprietary algorithm that that nobody could hold the candle to that for the last 20 plus years. Now Chat GPT is like sort of threatening them. So it is going to come, right? So Google uses AI in their search, and it is their direct revenue generator because they use ads. The algorithm bubbles up ads who are paying more to the top, etc. Amazon uses AI for increasing the ROI, because if I like this shirt I bought, it's going to recommend for me something similar, and I'm going to buy 10 more whether I want it or not. So that is directly increasing their revenue. So big tech companies have figured out how to use AI to increase their revenue. What other organizations have not yet figured out is how to do the same. Yes, pharmaceutical companies are doing that to a large extent. There are other consumer goods like Unilever and all these big tech companies are doing, but other sectors, financial sector, the big financial, JP Morgan, Chase, Bank of America, they're all threatened by fintech startups which use AI now to actually generate revenue. So I think interesting use cases of AI generating revenue in the new startups, and I'm now getting more and more involved in the climate technology space and sustainability space, and you can see how many of these startups actually use AI in the core business. So it's very, very interesting to note that yes, you can definitely use it to increase customer satisfaction in terms of predictive analytics, like for example Amtrak, right? Definitely it's about customer satisfaction and safety. It might or might not increase the number of passengers who are opting for Amtrak, the forecasting train delays, so things like that. So if you have a use case, you're a startup and you have a good use case to increase your revenue, that's the best, but other use cases would be beneficial as well.
I'm holding back smile because me and Lucky would joke about what sort of reference will we make about TV shows or movies and bring up AI machine learning, which throws everything off the curveball, right? They're like, well, we're trying to be practical, not bring in Will Smith to fight the robots, I'm not trying to bring in Arnold Schwarzenegger to have Skynet,
But there are interesting movies like the Tom Cruise one where they predict the future, Minority Report.
Minority Report,
yeah.
Right.
That actually, frighteningly, the technology is there. It doesn't manifest in the way they've shown in the movie, but it's there, right? You can predict a lot of things that they do in that. Predict crime based on past history, basically.
So the new show, which is frighteningly close to home, because I did my first, when you talk about climate machine learning, one of the machine learning technology that I was put some effort into it. I'll say that, because it didn't, take off, right? Is to find the machine learning using computer vision to detect pores, right? That is traveling through the air, right? And I'll give you a scenario. The fungus in certain part of the world, if the fungus can leave a forest and fly through the highways and get into your home, depending on your health condition, that could be very deadly. And it could be deadly to not just your single home, but the whole community or whole city, depending on the level of pores that are flying out of the forest, which is the fungi, whatever, however you pronounce it, right? Myceliums and things like that are grown in the forest, all of a sudden is flying through the air and reaching human populations in a number that, once it gets into your system, it impacts you within 3 days. You could be out of service, right? And I said, well, let's develop machine learning for that. So the point of it is that there's a show now using the same theory of mycelium, like fungi, like pores that are taking over human bodies because the temperature has risen, right? The world temperature has risen. Now the fungi have reason to, attack a human body, just like it does now, attacking animal insects in the forest. It attacks the human body to survive and keep itself alive, right? It's called The Last of Us, and it's an HBO. Love you, HBO, by the way. The Last of Us.
Me too. I have to check it out. My latest was White Lotus, which I don't need to speak about. The entire world is speaking on social media.
Oh, goodness. White Lotus. Yes, that's another one. I just want to put that out there because like this AI machine learning use cases will be necessary because of when you're watching The Last of Us, you're thinking to yourself like disruption happens and it changes everything overnight. But disruption happens and you're prepared for that disruption. It changes everything overnight for good. And COVID is not the best example, but I think it's a medium level of experience. As in, we have changed for good in many ways because now we're thinking of things differently and coming to a different conclusion. We're asking a different question than we did in 2020. And those questions that, like when we're talking about AI machine learning, like you said, you don't need AI machine learning for everything. But if you don't know the need that you needed at some point or another, and when you needed how to deploy it and you're not ready for it. So when it comes to like a small business or startups, that's my first address to them. Like, if you're a small business, I don't want to call you a small business. I need to call you a growing business, because if you're not growing, you're not only stalling, but you're falling off the cliff, right? So small business, startups, medium business, we all need to know, okay, we don't need to go back to the kitchen and cook up AI machine learning. What we need to cook up is better, say, data analytics or data storytelling, and stop right there. We get it. We know the risk and we're taking it. So I think there's a whole lot of knowledge that comes with it. And what that does, it prepares us, right, as an organization to say, like, look, the culture that we want to build for the future, one that will sustain us, no matter how much data we have, how much AI/ML do we have, if our people are not engaged in the business process that we have built, we will not survive, regardless of how much data or how much AI/ML we have, right? We have to bring our people together. And I think that's what AI/ML does in a very good way. It teaches the people cross-functional, like as in finance, marketing, your HR, and your procurement guy, the guy that does just sales and does nothing else, comes together in a room and talks about AI machine learning. And all of a sudden you're realizing that crosstalk is creating a culture of people, right? Like your organization doesn't need to be data culture, AI culture. It becomes a people culture because you're talking about these new innovations and how to survive as a company for the next 10 years and benefit the people of this organization with safety, privacy, and security at home, right? Rather like, if you have a paycheck, you get all of these. You can secure privacy at home if you like, So I just want to throw that out there because I started talking about shows, but I wanted to point this out. The fact is, people comes first. And if you can bring the people together and build a process, whatever that technology or solution is, it's just down the road. You have to find out. You will visualize whatever, but you will come with a fruition that is not yet visualized whatsoever. Because when you have the right people together, the right process is born, and that process gives birth to a whole lot of things that you don't even know exist at this point in 2023. Just want to throw that out there. Sorry, long rant.
Yeah, and we also like to say another part. You bring a very good point about culture. Ideally, it should happen. Not many organizations are coming together, but they should. The other thing we also like to say in the AIML world is the human in the loop, right? Because the heuristics of anything that you're automating, first thing is we have to understand that to automate something, whether it's like you've gone to the loan officer for a small business loan who's sitting in this office of a large corporate bank. They might look at the person and their credit history and know a little bit about the person, and quickly they can say, okay, this person looks like they're going to default, so let me not approve the loan, right? But the person who is rejecting that loan has been doing that job for 40 years, so looking at the person they can judge. But when we automate that credit loan approval, we want to understand what the person's logic is and convert it into actual logic in machine learning. So that's one thing, the heuristics. And sometimes what I have experienced is that people who are doing the job for a long time think that their job will go away by letting other people know the heuristics, so they won't help you if you're an AI person. But the other thing, the human in the loop, is that person is still required, because the machine will give a recommendation. It's the same thing. Will doctors be replaced? No.
No,
It's just enhancing the recommendation. So the machine will give the recommendation and the person can verify or expedite the process and go with that, right? So that's the human in the loop, which is another, I think, another side of the same coin, bringing people together.
We've covered a lot of different things, and I think a lot of areas that I've seen or heard so far, there's the opportunity of what cloud has really given people, because you can be a startup, and as long as you can compete and develop logic or an algorithm, you can compete out there with anyone else and start to look and so there's a big difference in what developing an algorithm for machine learning. A lot you see in Azure and AWS, where they give you machine learning modules or services. And in Azure, they have what they have for machine language, and they also have what they have in AWS. But those are all, at the end, those are opportunistic moments for people to take data and look and see what they really have. But there's a difference between machine learning and AI. It's a big difference, right? AI, we talked about it, what Google has done, and they've done it for years, and and people don't understand that spidering of the internet, the way they can just give us what we need. That's all part of their AI, and how they've been able to communicate that and make that work for them. That's one AI. Another realistic AI is CPT-3, right? The chat, the generative. I've been using that a lot. Have you had any? You used that much?
Yeah, I've used it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I installed like 2 different apps on my phone to understand, and I like the natural language processing. I like the way it works. You can see, I've tested it to try to get it to give me something to see how human I could get the responses. And like I even tried to pry, like, when was your first thought? When did you first realize? And it just, at the end, it says I cannot answer that. So there's limits to obviously the data and what the algorithm really is. It's not AI, but it is an AI that gives you a response that we feel is generative and it's real. Now I want to ask you this: what do you see in CPT-4? Because I see that the progression is, right now we see CPT-3 and it does a lot of communication via just what seems like text almost. It's just back and forth. But CPT-4, there has to be more AI that's going to be layered. What do you think? I don't know what CPT-4 is, and I know you're more, I know you probably know more about it than we do. Or what do you think about CPT?
It's built on large language models. And going back to your comment, so John McCarthy, who first coined the word AI, they called it, they had this whole conference, I think this was either 60s. Yeah, it was sometime in the 60s. Bunch of professors met in Carnegie Mellon. John McCarthy from Stanford coined the word artificial intelligence. And according to him, and usually in my presentations, I like to quote him because he's the first person who coined the term artificial intelligence. It's basically a general term for machine intelligence trying to simulate artificial intelligence. And machine learning is just one subdivision. So AI is the whole universe of this intelligence that machines we are building. And AI is one of them. Natural language processing, machine vision, and robotics, those are all different subdivisions under that. So yes, machine learning is not the whole AI, but it is a subset of the artificial intelligence. So that's number one. And number two, yes, Chat GPT is built on large language models taken from the internet. Imagine internet has this billions of texts, right? So when they used Wikipedia, they used everything. And so yes, I have experimented with it, and you feel like it is intelligent. However, the difference is, yes, it's intelligent because it has learned from large language-based models, but there is no critical reasoning and critical thinking. So I have asked it to write a lot of blogs for me about machine learning, and it seems like very automated. It's the text equivalent of a robotic voice when we do voice. There is no critical reasoning and critical thinking. Thirdly, most importantly, there is no references. So I know a lot of college students are using it, and you will fail because one of the tenets of any college essays, if you are quoting from a book from anywhere in the internet, you have to give references. There's no plagiarization allowed. So I think the main thing is, I'm not diminishing the importance of it. It's been used by millions and millions. So yes, it can write a blog about machine learning, and I can improvise it and save the time that I'm writing generic layout of a blog, or it can write another essay for me and so on. But I think the critical reasoning, critical thinking, unless we achieve what we call super intelligence, that would be missing.
I know you mentioned hard stop. We'll continue the conversation, but for now, if you have to drop off, I just want to thank you so much for making the time for us, because the question that Lucky just asked, it should go on forever, because we need to know the difference. We need to stop thinking of like everything as AI and call what machine learning is, because not everything is also machine learning. We shouldn't need machine learning. Everything. It's sort of like a blockchain, the buzzword, right? Put a blockchain on it. Like, no, please don't. And that's not how it works.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's how we finished the show, because thank you. That was amazing. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Take care.
Yeah.
I love it when you do it, man. That's like the best AyAyAI chant.
Yeah, dude.
Thanks,
that thing is wild.
I appreciate it. So with that, we'll see everybody next week. Stay tuned. Thank you.